You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
Let's get into the weekend with EJ Hradek, our first ever person to appear from Livonia, Michigan.
Yes. I take that distinction proudly to be here in Livonia, a suburb of Detroit, not too far from Plymouth, Michigan, where last night I was involved broadcasting the USA Hockey Prospects game, the All-American Prospects game, which included, I think, 2 Canadians and 2 Czechs, but it was the All-American Prospects game.
And you were speaking my language just before we hit record.
Yeah.
You brought up Detroit and how great it is now, and that is music to my ears because in the lobby of my hotel, last time I was there was a shirt that said, "Say nice things about Detroit." And I'm like, I live that. That's what I live and breathe.
I'm glad that you've taken that upon yourself to do that, because I agree with you. I was spent a little bit of time in downtown Detroit. I got some friends here. It was amazing. And I'm just really happy to see that, some of these cities we bounce around. As you know, I like to travel and go to a lot of different hotels. I don't really usually do anything in the city. I just go to the hotel and hang out. But in this case, I was out in downtown Detroit, and, over time, they've really revitalized the city in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of cool things to see, a lot of great architecture. So I, like you, will not say any bad things about Detroit. I'll actually say nice things, because it's a great place to kind of, bounce around and see a lot of cool stuff.
And on your travels, you get to watch some Leafs hockey. The Leafs go into Thursday night's game against the Devils on a 3-game skid. Their old coach comes to town, so you got bulletin board material, and they come out with an overtime win.
I was concerned, Dan, because we do this spot, and I count on the Leafs. I've been banging the drum that it's a little different this year. I like their team more of a contender, and I fear every week that things are going to go awry because it's a long season and things happen and guys get hurt. And teams fall, kind of go up and down all the time. But so I had a little nervousness last night as I was busy calling one game and keeping an eye on the Leafs updates. And but you know what? This is what I've been saying. They have a little more resiliency to them. I mean, they were missing John Tavares. They had lost 3 in a row. They've had a little bit of some underperformance and a challenge right now. And in comes Sheldon Keefe with those old Devils. And hey, they really responded. And you know what? The good news is, who were the guys that really stepped up? All those big guys in the game. I mean, Matthews had 2. Nylander had 2, including the game winner. Marner makes that great pass to Spring Nylander. McCabe comes back in the lineup and played really well. So, the important players on their team stepped up and got it done for them. And they needed to kind of break that, get off the schneid a little bit because, those were, 3 not so great performances. And the good news is here they are still sitting in first place. So, hopefully they can kind of continue to build on that. But, that was one of those games last night. It could have went bad. And you know how that goes in Toronto. I don't have to tell you, 3 losses becomes 4 losses becomes I'm going to jump off a bridge. So it's good that they kind of got back on the right track.
I want to touch upon 2 post-game comments. The first from Austin Matthews when he said about Willie Nylander's goal, I don't think anyone in the NHL, anyone in this league gets more breakaways. So I think that's a backhanded, hey, you ever going to back check comment?
Listen, nobody hangs like Willie Nylander. He's out there cherry picking, waving his stick. I'm open. Get me the puck. But, Craig Berube took a little different approach and asked kind of a similar thing. And he said, he's really got a high hockey IQ and he knows how to get into the spots and knows how to take advantage of teams in those situations. And in that overtime, I guess it was Luke Hughes had gone off. They had made a change. I think Matthews went off on the change too. And Nylander got behind them in the 3-on-3 and Marner made a great pass. I mean, Marner, I think he's the fastest Leaf now to get to 700 points last night. And, he's not bothered by all the contract situation. He's just having a really good year. And, I think all these guys are continuing to mature. I know that they come on the scene and they're really good players and we think they automatically know how to do everything. But I think over time we've seen that's not really the case. It does take time for guys to mature and to find their game, to find what it takes to win. And I think these guys are finding a little more of that. And I think Matthews, he's had the injury issues this year, but like he's growing into that captaincy with each and every day. I mean, they needed someone to step up last night, and he certainly did.
Now, the other post-game comment was from their former coach, Sheldon Keefe, when he said it was great. They did a little tribute. It was good to be back. This organization treated me great. It would have been spectacular to get 2 points. And then he said, I think I owed the Leafs that extra point.
Yeah, that was.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that. What does he mean by that? Does he feel bad? I guess he's trying to say I should have done more as coach.
Could have done better. I don't know. I read it the same way you did. It was like a throwaway kind of line at the end of a sentence that really didn't need to be there. He could have just said it would have been great to get to 2 points, but we'll take the one. That might have been the normal thing you say there. I find Sheldon Keefe to be kind of a little bit of an odd character. It's not listen, I'm an odd character. I mean, that's just, we're all have our little, things, but like, he's an intense hockey guy, and I got a chance to be around him a little bit in Prague when I was there at the start of the season for the Devils and Sabres. And he just seems like a really intense guy and kind of, not always socially kind of comfortable. So maybe that's what it was. He didn't really have anything else to say, and maybe I owe him one. I don't know what he meant by it.
The Montreal Canadiens faced the Leafs this weekend, and if you haven't glanced at the standings, this is not the same Montreal Canadiens team that was near to last or dead last in the NHL. Yeah. They're sniffing around a wild card spot.
Yeah, they're hot. They have been really good over the last, 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks, and moving up the standings a little bit. And they got another win, I believe, last night. And, good for Marty St. Louis and that group there. I think they're kind of overachieving right now. They got this kid, I think it's Dobes in goal. I don't even know. I don't know if I've ever really even seen him play other than to see highlights, but he's come into the National Hockey League, and all of a sudden it's like Ken Dryden from like when I was a child. I mean, out of nowhere, this guy comes in and starts playing well. I'd never heard of him before, but yeah, they've been a much tougher out. So I got to give them a lot of credit. I saw them against the Rangers about 8 weeks ago. I called their game, and you could see that they had an interesting group there. They just didn't know how to like nail things down all the time, but it seems like they found a comfort zone in the way they're playing. And they always I always say it's not who you play, but when you play them. And right now, it's not a great time to play the Montreal Canadiens. They're playing really well. You
brought up Ken Dryden. I could talk about Montreal Canadiens goalies for a week straight.
Yes.
You had Dryden. I had Steve Penny.
Ah, yes. The rusty Penny.
Who gave way to Patrick Waugh.
Yes.
But that's for another day. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
He was going to give way to Patrick Waugh. You had a couple other guys in that mix, but you had Bunny LaRock was with Patrick or with Ken Dryden, and then you're right. There was a couple of Canadian goalies in between Dryden and Waugh that were less memorable, namely Steve Penny.
Red Light Rasico.
Yeah, Andre Rasico. Yes, always good to see him ambling out to the crease if you were rooting against the Canadiens.
Right. Brian Hayward was in there.
Yeah, Brian Hayward is another guy. There was a bunch. There was several, and it's kind of crazy. They had Ken Dryden, and then they had Patrick Waugh. I guess some franchises are lucky that way. The Penguins had Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Sidney Crosby. Kind of crazy.
Ken Dryden, when they turned his book into a miniseries on the CBC, that was part of my childhood. The Game.
Yes.
What a fantastic piece! If you've never seen that should be required viewing for all hockey fans.
Dan, did you ever interview Ken Dryden?
I did not. When he was a politician, I was at some events where he was at, and I'm like, I don't know if I could sit through that conversation when he was a politician. It wasn't really riveting stuff.
You didn't want to do that. I will just tell you that he came in. I was doing some work for the MSG network in New York, and he came in one night and sat with myself and Kenny Danico and Al Troutwick, who was the host at the time there. And he sat down and we were asking questions, and I just kept saying the same thing over and over and over in my head, was just ask a short question and shut up. because sometimes, as you know, in this business, we tend to be eager and want to interrupt or ask another question. And I was determined to ask a short question and shut the hell up because he could go on. And I was really interested in what he had to say. So I was proud of myself. And the one time in my career, I did the right thing and I shut up.
That's what I tell young broadcasters. Less is more.
You know, you get it.
Let's touch upon JT Miller and what's going on with the Vancouver Canucks. He was benched in the third period of their game against the Kings last night. They've got to figure the situation out. We talked about it last week. Yeah. And it's only gotten worse in a week since we last spoke about it.
Yeah. I saw an interview JT just did with the media, and it was so uncomfortable, like, you know, watching the tape, because he's standing there, he's still got his shoulder pads on, and he's kind of moving his hair back, and still a little sweat going, and guys are asking him like really like hard questions about, you know, his health, and then, you know, not playing well, and he was giving really short, kind of terse answers, and, you know, but like I don't think he had I think that's what it was. He was just kind of like, I don't think he had really any answers, so he didn't really know what to say. But you're right. It's, Vancouver is a tough place to play hockey because the expectations there are, you know, especially last year, they get raised like they did last year, and they have never won. You know, going back to when they came in the league, they had some trips to the final, and I just find it from afar, it can be a very difficult place to play and work when things aren't going well in the hockey business. And I always feel like, you know, whoever's there or whoever's coaching or, you know, playing on the team, they need to try to bring some sunshine, try to have some levity. Like, you know, if JT had a little different personality, maybe just have a laugh with the reporters at that moment. I mean, there's nothing else that can be said, but he looks like a young guy right now that, you know, is trying to figure it all out. He's been in the league for a while. I mean, he's a 30-year-old guy now, or maybe 31, but still, that's relatively young when you're trying to kind of figure out answers in your life and in your profession. But you're right. They've got some struggles right now. It has really been a year of underachievement. They've had some injury issues. I mean, last year, everything went their way, right? They came out. Everybody was healthy. Everybody produced, played well. They got to the second round of the playoffs. Every year isn't like that, as you know, and this year it's been much different. They've had injury issues, and if it wasn't for Lankinen, I mean, think about Kevin Lankinen being there. If it wasn't for him, they'd be further down the standings than they are now. I mean, he saved them in that first part of the season with a lot of really good performances, particularly on the road. So I don't know what Patrick Alvin and Jimmy Rutherford are going to do there, but it doesn't seem like it's getting any better right now.
Tony DeAngelo is much maligned. He has been essentially kicked out of the KHL, so he's found his way off another team. Do you think a team in the NHL takes a chance on him, knowing he will come very cheap and knowing it will be his last opportunity if anyone give it to him? Boy,
you got to really have to need a right shot defenseman that helps your power play. I mean, because his skill set is pretty specific, right? What he does to help you.
And you read on the riot act, say, we will not put up with anything. You're here. Yeah. If you screw up once, you're gone. I think Dan, he would receive the message.
Hasn't that message been delivered already by different teams in different years in different cities? Yeah. It's funny. I see Tony responding on social media to people, and I don't know. I find him a little bit of an interesting character. I mean, I know the background, and, you know, there's a story I got from scouts years ago, and I think it's really held true about Tony DeAngelo, is that, when I was talking to guys who were amateur scouts in that year, and they had meetings about him, and they said, we came to the conclusion that, like, he's a talented young guy, and there's things he can do. He's got a good offensive skill set, but he's one of these guys that, in his words, like when the wires crossed or the wires touched, it was a short circuit. And when you really think about his career, that assessment has been pretty accurate, because he is a talented guy in certain parts of the game. Now, probably less so now at this stage of his career. And you talk to guys who played with him, and a lot of guys actually really like him. And the times I've been around him, I don't have a big issue with him. I don't think we see eye to eye on, I think world or political events, but that's okay. I don't see eye to eye with a lot of people on those things. But at the end of the day, I just don't know if I'm running a team, right? Like, I just know the likelihood of what's going to happen. So there's so many players, Dan, out there. Like you look at the American Hockey League. I was talking about this last night with a former coach after the game last night. And like, you know, you want hungry players on your team and guys that really want to be there. And sometimes, you know, we're talking about rebuilding teams and how the tendency is to get veterans to come in and help the younger players. Well, if you get the wrong veterans, and a lot of those guys oftentimes are the wrong veterans because they bring with them other baggage that it's hard for them now to come in and be selfless and work with younger players and bring that competitive night after night after night. So you have to find particular players. And I think there's so many players in the American League that could fill a similar role to what you're talking about with Tony DeAngelo. You just have to find them. They're out there playing. There's a lot of guys in that league that could be playing in the National Hockey League that just for different circumstances haven't had that opportunity. So I don't know what of all these 32 teams, what they're thinking, but for me, and it's nothing really personally against Tony. Like I said, when I've been around him, he seems like a very affable guy. But like the likelihood is the wires are going to cross again at some point. And I don't know if I need that, you know, that problem.
Well, it would essentially be like setting a grenade in the middle of the room and say, guys, just going to leave this here.
Yeah.
Just no sudden movement. And he can still play. I just looked up his stats here. Yeah. So 34 games in the KHL for St. Petersburg and 32 points in those 34 games.
Yeah. I mean, but that is the KHL, right? And, you know, it's not the same league as the National Hockey League. And he's probably playing a ton there, you know, per game. And then to come over in the NHL, I don't see him as a guy that's going to be a big minutes eater. He's more of like I said, a specialty kind of guy. So listen, I would say this, Dan, there's 32 teams. If somebody wants to sign him and give him that opportunity, and if it works out, good for them. Because, but I just look at what does they say about the past is, you know, a precursor to the future, something along those lines. It's like, we've seen this movie. We know how it ends. Yeah. And again, it's not like it ends like with this horrible explosion. It just ends with him kind of getting scratched, being unhappy, being released. You know, occasionally it ends with him maybe getting into a fight with a goalie, but, you know, most of the time it just ends with him being scratched and then having to be moved out, and that's that. I just think there are other options for most teams out there.
I just want to know if they're still being paid in the KHL with money in cash in a brown paper bag.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've confirmed that. I've confirmed that with at least 5 guys that have played there. They're like, oh, yeah, that's how you get paid, and you don't dare count that while they could be in the same room. And whatever it is, you don't go back. If they're short a few bucks, just leave it.
Yeah, yeah. The KHL is kind of an interesting league because like they don't, you know, they can't charge enough, you know, to make it worthwhile. So these guys just, I mean, I guess the people who own these teams have, you know, they have money to do it. And it's a way for them maybe to move their money around, so to speak, for the lack of, you know, a different term. But, yeah, I heard the same thing that you heard, that people get that bag of cash and it would just be there you go. Just put it under your arm and walk out and keep walking. You know, don't worry about it. It's all there. I heard a lot of strange stories about things that went on in the KHL. I don't know if it's as much now because the guys I talked to were there in years gone by and not more recently, but I've heard a lot of strange stories.
Yeah, there's no boring stories about someone who's played in the KHL. It's never boring. If you ever encounter someone in your life that played in the KHL, sit down and pay attention. That's right. And like I did with Ken Dryden, ask a short question and shut up and listen, and you'll learn. Yeah, and a short goodbye, like we do here. That's right. Goodbye, dear.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.